Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. The morning sun pierced through the fog hanging over the sleepy town of Larkwood, casting a muted glow against the weathered storefronts lining Main Street. It was a town long past its heyday, a once thriving hub of industry now reduced to quiet streets and the occasional echoes of laughter from children at play. But beneath its quaint exterior lay an undercurrent of tension, an unsettling sense of things unsaid. It would soon become clear that darkness lingered just below the surface. On the 14th of September, 2001, Halloween decorations already adorned the shop windows, clashing with the still summer warmth that enveloped the town. It was a Saturday morning like any other, interrupted only by the rhythmic sounds of life beginning to stir. The soft whir of the bakery's ovens, the squeak of wooden porch swings, and the rumble of trucks delivering goods to the remaining businesses. But as the clock struck 10, that ordinary day would spiral into something sinister. The local library, a place of safety and refuge, was about to become the scene of unimaginable horror. At precisely that moment, the librarian, a beloved staple of the community, Mae Braddock, was discovered slumped over her desk, surrounded by neat stacks of books awaiting reshelving. The tranquility of the library shattered as concerned patrons rushed to her side. Police arrived quickly, yet the vibrant world outside continued to churn, oblivious to the truth unfolding within those walls. A murder had taken place in Larkwood, staining its facade with blood. Investigators would soon unearth a web of secrets, lies, and ultimately, the identity of a killer. The investigation would mark the beginning of a harrowing journey for the town, a journey that would expose the fragility of trust and the complexities of human nature. The victim, Mae Braddock, was more than just the librarian of Larkwood. She was the heart of the community. With her gentle demeanor and infectious laugh, she had nurtured generations of readers, instilling a love for literature in both young and old. Her presence was a comforting anchor amidst change, a daily fixture in the small town's rhythm. At 63, Mae had dedicated the last 30 years of her life to the Larkwood Public Library. Each book she shelved carried a story, a piece of her spirit, infused into the very fabric of the town. From the adventurous children wandering the aisles to the elderly looking for nostalgia wrapped in paperback, Mae knew them all. Her life, however, was not without shadow. Mae was a widow. Her husband had passed away a decade prior after a long illness. Though she wrapped herself in the warmth of her work and the kindness of her neighbors, whispers floated among them about the loneliness that often gripped. Nightly tea rituals alone at her kitchen table became a solitary echo of times now gone. Investigators soon learned that Mae had recently begun attending a book club, attempting to forge new connections. Conversations in town suggested she had been catching the eye of Jake Henderson, a younger man whose charm sparked gossip and intrigue. But not everyone was pleased by the burgeoning friendship. As the police combed through her personal effects, they uncovered a few unusual items: a stack of unsent letters, each one addressed to a different member of the community, hinting at unresolved grievances and unspoken words. They painted a complex picture of Mae, revealing layers to her life that few had dared to explore. Beneath the surface of small-town gentility lay a simmering conflict, and Mae, it seemed, had become entangled in it. The crime scene. The library was cloaked in a mournful silence, every corner steeped in an unsettling stillness. Once a sanctuary for the townspeople, it had transformed into a grim tableau of violence. Witnesses lingered outside, constrained by yellow crime scene tape that marked the boundary between the familiar and the unfathomable. The air was thick with speculative whispers, punctuated by the stark contrast of staccato clicks from camera shutters, capturing the scene for posterity. Detective Samuel Hargrove stepped inside, his senses heightened as he soaked in the gravity of the situation. Mae Braddock's lifeless body remained slumped at her desk, her once vibrant spirit reduced to a chilling stillness. The smell of aged paper mingled with the metallic tang of blood, creating an atmosphere that felt impossibly heavy. He forced himself to focus, pushing aside the empathy that threatened to cloud his judgment. A preliminary examination revealed no signs of forced entry. Everything appeared untouched except for Mae, whose blood had pooled on the desk, staining the pages of the open book beneath her For Amma Fitzgerald novel, symbolically echoing the beauty and tragedy of her life. Investigators noted a peculiar arrangement of her glasses, carefully set aside rather than knocked off. It hinted that Mae might have known her assailant, making the betrayal all the more poignant. Nearby, Detective Hargrove spotted a thin silver bookmark protruding from the desk drawer, half dragged out as if someone hastily sought refuge in a story amidst the chaos. The bookmark bore an engraved inscription, a clue now holding the weight of potential betrayal. As forensic specialists swarmed the space, Hargrove meticulously surveyed the library's layout. Empty chairs bore witness to the tragic event, and remnants of a book club flyer lay scattered near Mae's desk. The flyer, emblazoned with cheerful graphics, now served as a ghostly reminder of camaraderie soured by death. Each detail documented hailed from a seemingly quaint existence, yet the specter of rage and envy danced in the air, waiting to reveal its secrets. Outside, onlookers watched with wide, shocked eyes, their minds teeming with questions, while the community's core cracked open, exposing the oily truths hidden within. In Larkwood, they would soon realize nothing was as it seemed. The early investigation the next morning brought a cloud of urgency over the Larkwood Police Department. Detective Samuel Hargrove gathered his team, a mix of seasoned officers well acquainted with the town's intricacies and fresh recruits eager to prove themselves. With Mae Braddock's murder weighing heavily on their consciences, he understood that the pressure to resolve the case quickly was palpable. As he sat at the cluttered conference table, the detectives began to brainstorm leads. They considered Mae's life, the relationships she maintained, and the lingering shadows surrounding those who had crossed her path. Hargrove emphasized the importance of interviewing every individual tied to the library, no matter how insignificant their connection may seem. The first interviews took place at the library itself, a hushed atmosphere enveloping the once bustling building. The demeanor of the staff was subdued, eyes downcast, but their fear transformed into urgency as they recounted their last encounters with Mae. They spoke of her kindness, her dedication, and a palpable tension she had harbored in recent weeks. A few mentioned witnessing heated exchanges between Mae and local patrons who disagreed with her book selections at the club. One name kept cropping up: Jake Henderson. The younger man had frequented the library, seemingly enraptured by Mae's passion for literature. But there were also murmurs that his interest had transitioned from innocent admiration to something dark. Detective Hargrove noted the conflicting accounts that floated out of the interviews. Admiration for Mae's spirit bounded by jealousy from others, a palpable line drawn between those who cherished her and those who felt threatened. Hours slipped by as the detectives pieced together a makeshift timeline. They discovered that Mae had been seen leaving the library just 2 days prior, exchanging friendly but intense words with an unfamiliar figure near the entrance, a stranger whose face was yet to be identified. Who was this person, and what role did they play in the growing web surrounding Mae's life? As evening descended upon Larkwood, Hargrove gathered his team to discuss their findings. Each small revelation only amplified the enormity of their task ahead. A community mourned in silence, but soon they would unveil the pointed finger of suspicion that traveled in concentric circles around the heart of the town. With every passing hour, the urgency grew. Mae's secrets would lead them to the truth, yet her death demanded justice. The dead ends. As the days turned into a week, ice crept into the marrow of the investigation. Detective Hargrove and his team worked tirelessly, reaching out to every lead. But the facade of cooperation from the townsfolk began to crack under the weight of suspicion and fear. Larkwood was a small town, but in its intimacy lay an intricate web of allegiances and secrets, likes of which were more complex than the detectives had initially anticipated. They followed up on Jake Henderson, the young man whose name continued to echo through their interviews. It turned out he was well loved at the local diner and had earned a respectable reputation among his peers. When they brought him in for questioning, he offered ample alibis that were solid and corroborated. He had been at a party miles away at the time of the murder, surrounded by friends who remembered every detail of that night. Frustration mounted as the detectives turned their attention to the mysterious stranger seen exchanging heated words with Mae just days before her death. Despite canvassing the surrounding neighborhoods and releasing a description to the local papers, no one came forward. It was as if he had vanished from existence, leaving behind only unanswered questions and lingering paranoia. The leads fell flat one after another. A rumor traced back to a supposed illicit affair Mae was having with a married man turned out to be nothing more than gossip fueled by envy. Another avenue investigated was the local book club, where members had clashed over titles and themes, but had no violent intent against Mae. As team members pored over their notes, Hargrove felt the weight of hopelessness settling in. A community that had once welcomed conversation was enveloped in whispers and conjecture. The very air of Larkwood grew thick with tension, as unspoken accusations cloaked friendships. Just when it seemed the investigation might spiral into a sea of dead ends, a package arrived at the precinct, an anonymous tip containing a photograph of Mae taken months earlier, hinting at a different, more insidious layer to her life. In the stillness of uncertainty, the unmarked envelope felt like a flicker of light in a storm, beckoning them back to the tangled threads of Mae Braddock's existence. The case was far from over. There would be no more stagnation. The truth lay hidden, waiting to be unearthed. A break in the case. The photograph arrived just as the detectives were grappling with a relentless sense of stasis. It depicted Mae standing in front of an unfamiliar building, its facade dark and gothic, much like the secrets it housed. There was an unsettling intimacy to the image, an undeniable sense of belonging in an unfamiliar world. She smiled wide, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of something deeper, a mix of confidence and perhaps something dark. Hargrove felt the energy shift in the room as he pinned the photo to the wall alongside other evidence. His team flocked around the image as if it were a beacon of hope, a catalyst to rekindle the sparks of their investigation. But the question remained, where was this building, and what connection did it have to Mae? Searching maps of Larkwood, they finally identified the structure in the photo. An old community center that had fallen into disrepair over the years, rumored to be a gathering space for various local groups. But its usage had waned. The detectives quickly assembled a plan to visit the dilapidated site, now overshadowed by weeds and neglect, yet remarkably it carried an air of forgotten charm. As the team explored the eerie hallways, littered with old flyers and faded photographs, they uncovered remnants of gatherings long past, personal items left behind, and neglected hopes that had fallen to dust. It was there, beneath layers of neglect. They stumbled upon a carved wooden chest tucked into a corner, half hidden by errant foliage. Inside lay a trove of discarded materials, letters exchanged among various locals, and intertwining tales of discontent. Each letter painted a picture of factions formed in the microcosm of Larkwood's community, revealing stark rifts about books, beliefs, and betrayals. It was a vivid illustration of the emotional currents hidden beneath the town's placid surface. Amidst the scattered documents, another photograph emerged. This time it captured Mae in close proximity to a group of locals, caught in what appeared to be an argument. The intensity in her expression spoke volumes. There was tension etched into every feature. Fueled by a newfound determination, Hargrove sent his team to track down all individuals in the photograph. Every face was a potential puzzle piece that could link back to Mae's life, her conflicts, and, ultimately, her death. The threads of the investigation were finally tangling into a tapestry, ripe with contradictions and hidden truths. Hargrove sensed they were on the brink of something significant. Last shot of clarity lay ahead. The pieces were slowly aligning, and with them came the potential for unraveling the darkness that had engulfed Larkwood. The suspect. The photographs from the community center ignited an investigation that had long been mired in uncertainty. One name began to rise above the others, a woman named Clara Fields, a longtime library patron and former member of Mae's book club. Clara had always been a little eccentric, her opinions often too strong, her passion for literature bordering on obsession. As Hargrove reviewed her profile, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was more than just a bystander in this sordid tale. Detective Hargrove called Clara in for questioning. When she arrived at the station, she wore a floral sundress that belied the storm brewing within her. Her demeanor shifted almost imperceptibly when she learned about the direction of the investigation. The lightness in her voice faded, replaced by a tightness that spoke volumes. She claimed surprise at Mae's murder, which resounded false in the air of the small interview room. Hargrove's gaze flitted to a recent article pinned to the bulletin board, an opinion piece written by Clara that lambasted Mae for her book selections. And the direction of the club. It was punctuated with fervent accusations of elitism, claiming that Mae had alienated many members with her choices. It was an outpouring of frustration that could have easily translated into something far more sinister. As the interview progressed, Clara grew increasingly agitated, defending her loyalty to Mae even while her eyes flared with barely concealed emotion. Hargrove was keenly aware of how the tension thickened in the room, the air becoming electric with half-purged resentments. When he pressed her about the photograph showing her in a heated argument with Mae, Clara's expression morphed into one of indignation. "I had every right to be upset," she exclaimed, her hands trembling as she raised them, palms facing outward in front of her face. Mae was turning our beloved book club into a mockery, all while putting on a smiling face for the town. It was so disingenuous. Hargrove noted the nuances of her rage. It was raw and real, tangling with threads of envy. The focus on Mae's social success illuminated how Clara's bitterness had festered. Hargrove understood the danger a mind like Clara's present Samion, whose passion could easily morph into something darker if left unchecked, with no concrete evidence linking her to the crime. Hargrove finished the interview with a feeling of unease. Clara left the station, a whirlwind of indignation trailing her. Hargrove wasn't convinced she had killed Mae, yet it was clear that her feelings toward the librarian were complicated, nesting deep within the shadows of jealousy and fury. As Clara departed, he knew he couldn't let this lead fizzle out. He instructed his team to dig deeper into Clara's past. It was time to reveal just how far her discontent may have driven her. There was a storm brewing beneath Larkwood's surface, and Hargrove was determined to uncover every troubled current swirling underneath. The trial. As autumn descended over Larkwood, the town buzzed with anticipation and dread. The trial of Clara Fields began on a crisp Monday morning, and the small courthouse buzzed with a palpable energy, a blend of gossip and anxiety, filling the air as townsfolk gathered. Chairs squeaked under shifting bodies as residents whispered their theories, their loyalties either circling like vultures around Clara or steeped in sympathy for Mae Braddock, the deceased librarian whose light had been snuffed out too soon. Detective Hargrove found himself seated near the front, a spectator in a courtroom adorned with the weight of expectation. Clara stood trial not just for murder, but for the unraveling of the town's family. The prosecution painted her as a woman driven by envy and rage, wielding her thoughts and words as weapons that led to a fatal confrontation with Mae. Witnesses recounted snippets of heated arguments, Clara's amplified disdain echoing in memory. Yet, the defense fought back, arguing that Clara had no motive to kill. They meticulously dismantled the prosecution's case, exposing the fragility of grievances that could be easily embellished by a jaded community's memory. They portrayed Clara not as a murderer, but as a victim of circumstance, a passionate woman misunderstood in a close-knit environment that often suffocated dissent. As the courtroom drama unfolded, tension coiled tight. Hargrove felt the weight of his investigation pressing on him, the struggle of piecing together motives, the complexities of human emotion, and the question of justice hanging like a damning shadow over the proceeding. Clara's testimony was a symphony of manipulation. She spoke with an earnestness that threatened to sway the jury, weaving sorrow and regret into her narrative. "I loved Mae," Clara declared, her voice trembling yet resolute. "My only regret is that she didn't see me for who I truly was. But to take a life, that wasn't me. It could never be me." Hargrove watched as Clara's words sparked murmurs in the gallery, her performance expertly treading the line between contrition and defiance. But the glimmer of truth had eluded her. Her passionate articulations could not obscure the shadow lurking just behind the facade of her grief. As the trial dragged on, Hargrove felt the weight of evidence intertwining with the human condition, something so erratically unpredictable as jealousy could lead one to dark places. In the days that followed, pieces of testimony continued to unravel the ties between Clara, Mae, and the burden of expectation in Larkwood. Closing arguments approached, and hope seemed to hang delicately in the balance. Hargrove couldn't shake the nagging feeling that though Clara might escape tangible conviction, the underlying currents of animosity in the town had already found a new target. Ravenous speculation and bitter truths would continue to ripple within the community long after the gavel hit its mark. Clara was on trial, but in many ways, Larkwood itself was being judged. The storm that had engulfed the town was not yet over. It was merely shifting, embodying the unresolved anger that lived in the hearts of its people. The aftermath. The courtroom was a hushed chamber when the verdict was finally delivered. A collective breath held tight in the chests of those gathered. Clara Fields was found not guilty of murder, the jury unable to reach a unanimous decision. Relief surged through some who had come to her defense, while indignation flared in others who felt justice had been denied. As Clara emerged, a mixture of tears and triumph glistened in her eyes, the shadows of grief quickly overshadowed by a flood of validation. Yet, outside the courthouse, the atmosphere was thick with unrest. Townsfolk whispered and glared, some extending weary arms to Clara in reluctant consolation, others casting judgmental glances like daggers. Larkwood had spent a tumultuous season embroiled not just in the investigation of Mae's murder, but in a battle between loyalty and betrayal, love and hatred. Detective Hargrove stood on the courthouse steps, watching as Clara maneuvered through the throngs of people. A girl released from shackles that had never fully clasped around her. While the celebration of her acquittal spilled into the streets, Hargrove's got twisted with the knowledge of the unresolved truth swirling in the chaos. Clara may have escaped the legal implications of her actions, but the invisible scars left in her wake would linger on. Back at the Larkwood Police Department, Hargrove convened a meeting with his team. They examined the case notes one more time, shifting through the ebb and flow of evidence. Though Clara's acquittal felt like a defeat, they agreed that the investigation could not end here. The intricacies of relationships in Larkwood had created a quilt of unresolved emotions that were wreaking havoc, and their work was far from complete. Over the following weeks, the townspeople dealt with the aftermath in their own ways. A palpable shift settled in the community. Friendships fractured over alliances drawn and drawn back, while others clung tighter than before. Conflicted allegiances began emerging openly in social settings, amplifying the shadows that Mae's death had cast. In the heart of the town, the library remained closed for renovations, a potent symbol of hope torn asunder, now a silent testimony to the danger of untold stories. When its doors would reopen, Hargrove knew that a different narrative would need to be woven not only for Mae's memory, but for a community yearning for healing. In the weeks that followed, Hargrove's team continued to investigate the quieter corners of Larkwood, pursuing threads that lingered in the air like perfume faint but present. With every conversation, every subtle detection of unease, they sensed that the soul of the town was undergoing a metamorphosis, moving towards a reckoning with all the sorrows it had buried. Larkwood would never be the same, and Hargrove understood the complexities of human emotion perhaps better now than ever. The journey towards truth, justice, and reconciliation would weave them all into new story-zones, searching for closure amidst the shadowy tapestry of unspeakable secret. As for Mae Braddock, her memory would remain a haunting refrain reminding everyone that darkness might thrive in the light of innocence. Reflection. Months after the trial wrapped with a verdict that had left Larkwood divided, Detective Hargrove found himself wandering the now reopened public library. The familiar scent of aged paper mingled with the cool, crisp air as he stepped inside, a tangible reminder of Mae Braddock's legacy. The shelves, once filled with the wisdom and dreams of countless readers, now felt strangely hollow, an echo of discussions that would never take place again. As he examined the softly lit rows, he reflected on the case that had consumed him. The tangled relationships and unspoken grievances had revealed the deepest fissures in human nature. A reminder that the darkest acts often stem from the most complex emotion. The citizens of Larkwood had endured not just the loss of a beloved librarian, but also the unraveling of their own identities and moral compasses, each grappling with where the truth lay. Hargrove knew that justice didn't always wear the cloak of conviction. It was an elusive concept that danced on the edge of human understanding. Clara Fields, though acquitted, would carry the scars of suspicion and resentment, just as the community would learn to live with the stains of betrayal. Questions lingered, shadows were cast, and life moved, although it would never return to its former norm. In the quiet corners of this library, he could almost hear Mae's laughter mingling with the whispers of stories untold. The journey of truth had merged with the journey of healing, reminding him and others that the past, no matter how haunting, could not be erased. Each day brought the chance to create anew, to seek solace in words and stories. And Hargrove hoped the community would find their way back to each other, one page at a time.